Man, it's that time of the year already. August, Milan plays their first game in Serie A tomorrow versus Cremonese, which is very, very exciting. I'm super happy to see the guys back in the league. But my football brain is kind of already ticking and going, especially with my local club, San Diego FC. We're in first place right now. Things are looking nice for us to maybe potentially win some silverware this year. So that'll be a historic moment for the city. But we're here to talk about Milan. And it's kind of crazy how the tone shift from the last couple seasons, especially in the summer mercato. How, remember, 2 seasons ago, we sold Maldini, we sold Tonali, we sold so many of these pivotal players and so many of these pivotal pillars, right, in these teams to really make Milan special. And just the absolute shift of the attitude in the team, right? Bringing in someone like Allegri, who's experienced and kind of has that charisma about him. But also, I think something that's been really underlooked this season was the importance of Igli Tare and his just experience in the mercato in Italy and selling dead weight in this squad, accumulating up to 200 million in sales. Just alone, 60 million for Thiaw and Okafor, which is terrific business, and a complete overhaul of the midfield, bringing in names like Samuele Ricci for a steal of 25 million. I feel like if you had someone like a Forlani trying to negotiate these deals, we would have had to pay 50 million for Samuele Ricci. We would have let go Thiaw for what was it, like 40 million or something like that, or way less. I think it was like 20 million when Newcastle was negotiating. And then on top of that, Okafor as well out the door. But Igli Tare, we were all speculating whether or not he was the right one to kind of bring in, but he has most definitely proved us wrong, and especially proved me wrong. So for me, he deserves his flower. Tare, I tip my hat to you. I was always under the impression I wanted the sporting director of an Atalanta or a Bologna or someone kind of more Italian in that sense. I mean, maybe that's just my bias, but regardless of the fact is, Tade has really impressed me, especially not only with the sales, but the acquisitions he's made in this team. I mentioned Samuel Ricci, but bringing in someone like a Modric and most recently a Victor Boniface, which is an absolute steal. I think it's 30 million with a loan with an option to buy, which is phenomenal, with a contract I think till 2030, which is awesome. So Boniface really has me excited, and he has all the fans excited as well. I'm already seeing TikToks. It's like, oh, POV Boniface scores in the derby and he's doing the celebration. That celebration is going to be so fire in the San Siro, I'm not going to lie. But regardless of the fact is, it's crazy how much of a positive outlook this mercato looks versus previously in the last 2 summers, right? When you think about Fonseca and the names that we brought in that summer, I'm just thinking we brought in Emerson, we brought in Morata, we brought in these mediocre names. And you just look at Boniface, Modric, Ricci, and a bunch of Jashari as well, which that was a tough deal to get over the line. And Tade persisted and Tade got it done. So it's just crazy how much of a positive outlook this summer mercato looks versus the previous ones that we had. This summer mercato definitely reminds me of the one in 2018 where we just had an overhaul of players coming in, right? It was like that Bonucci summer, Musacchio, Borini. I can go on about the names that we brought in. Çalhanoğlu as well, Kessie, Conti. I could go on. I think it was 11 players we brought in with the Miribelli, the Faso Belli, right? The duo, the dynamic duo where they had the try handshake. But regardless of the fact is, again, the positive outlook that this mercato has had versus previous ones is sensational. I feel like it's just been a complete turnaround of how this management was running, right? Where you had Ibra talking here and there. Ibra's been a lot more silent, and I feel like this summer mercato has looked a lot more better. And on top of that, you have Forlani kind of stepping back from these deals. And on top of that, you have Jeffrey Moncada, who is the chief scout now. He's not the sporting director, and this was exactly always the role that he was supposed to have, is just lead scout. Just give me the names, and I'll get the deals done. So I feel like you're starting to see a lot more of a structure in this Milan team, and I feel like that kind of also leads into why we've been so successful this summer mercato. So it's super positive going forward with how this management is running. And I mean, look, with the names that we've brought in, the sales that we've made, I feel like it's definitely a breath of fresh air to actually see this team kind of looking a lot more healthy. And I feel like with that being said, it's like you see, like I mentioned, the tone shift of this team. You have someone like Allegri, you have someone like Modric, who are really having that experience in football for loads of decades, right? Modric alone probably playing 20 years of first team football. So you kind of just look at that, and that being said, it's been much more of a positive going forward into this season. So I did quickly want to review the body game in the Coppa Italia. Obviously, a 2-0 solid performance. And I think what we really saw at display is the great counterattacking style that this Milan team showed. And I feel like what we've always known that this team has had, right? It gets the best out of these players, right? It's the correct profile of players that you're playing in, right? You had a Fonseca who wanted to play kind of a more technical style, kind of like 1-2s, kind of short, close attacking football, right? But it's just, quite frankly, this team was not built for that. It didn't get the best out of guys like Leao, didn't get the best out of players like Teo. Pulisic maybe, right? Kind of got the best out of him. And I mean, Reinders definitely was just flourishing in that system. But it's like you had a guy like Reinders, right, flourishing, but then you had Leao kind of falling and dropping in form. And I feel like this counterattacking style, right, that Allegri has kind of brought out in this system is definitely one to kind of get the best out of players. And unfortunately, Leao did get injured, but I think it was just a knock, and he is going to be out versus Cremonese. But I think it is just a precautionary thing, which I'm completely fine with, right? Cremonese, that's one of those games where you can kind of risk, your top guys being out, and I'm more than confident that these subs are going to come in and make that difference, certainly. I did want to talk about the Salam Makers rejuvenation. I myself was not optimistic whatsoever about Salam Makers coming in, right? I was always under the impression like, oh, we kind of know what he's going to give you, and it's this, and that. But after being out on loan for 2 years, right, at Bologna and Roma, it did wonders for him. And he looks like a completely different player, more experienced player that wants to show his quality. And I think this formation and this style specifically is one to get the best out of him. Pioli couldn't do it, right? And I think you saw the product that we got with Alexis with that type of style of play that we did with Pioli. But I think Salam Makers, right? I think Allegri kind of took a page out of the Bologna book and the Roma book to see, okay, how can we get the best out of Salam Makers? And this is the exact formula to get the best out of Alexis. So I'm really excited to see what he has to bring this season. And it kind of just begs a question for me is, where does someone like Alex Jimenez fit in this system? Is he a rotation? Is he a bench? Because we know his quality going forward. I think he does give a little bit of Salam Makers, right? He kind of reminds me of Salam Makers a little bit, but with how great Alexis is and how he's been doing, especially in Serie A alone, right? For Roma, for Bologna, and especially in this game versus Bari, he really impressed me a lot, right? Watching that game, I feel like it kind of begs the question, where does Alex Jimenez fit into this? For me, I think it's strictly bench rotation, right? He can play on that left mid. He can play on that right mid if, Estupiñán gets injured, but, knock on wood, he doesn't get injured. But regardless of the fact is, that's where I think Alex Jimenez is going to kind of fit in this system, is just strictly rotation, right? If you need some fresh legs on there, he's going to give you exactly that. And he's still very young. He's still very inexperienced. And I think we did definitely see that last season, right? He got a lot of starts last season, and respectfully so. I think he deserved it 100% because he was by far our best fullback probably last season. Teo, uninspiring, right? Kyle Walker was just very off and on. Every now and then he had a good game, but Alex Jimenez was probably the most consistent fullback that we had. And Emerson isn't even a question of a shadow of a doubt in that. But also, someone else who impressed me in that body game too was Ruben Loftus-Cheek. And this was someone that I think Allegri really wanted to keep because he definitely sees the potential in him. And it's crazy how it's like every single coach that we get, they always see that potential in Loftus-Cheek, right? Where I think on paper, what Loftus-Cheek gives you, it's exactly what you want in a midfielder, right? Tall, strong, has that ability to carry the ball forward into deep spaces in the pitch. And he's just one of those players where, in my opinion, I think we still do need a bigger sample size to play at a top and consistent level to win over my trust personally. But with the sample size that we saw versus Body, I'm very optimistic on what Loftus-Cheek can bring in this midfield. But the question is, right, what formation do we go? I think the more popular option right now is a 3-4-3, but I could definitely see this team working with a 3-5-2. But then that kind of begs a question. If it's a 3-5-2 right now with Boniface, and obviously Leao is a bona fide starter, where does that lead Pulisic? Where does that lead Santiago Jimenez? And that kind of just begs a question. So I think 3-4-3, I think we're going to see right, Mike Maignan in the back. I think you're going to go Pavlovic, Gabia, and De Winter. I think in the 4 in the midfield, I think you're going to go Estupinian on the left. I think you go Jashari, and I think you go Ricci, and then Alexis Salam Makers on the right, and then your front 3, Leao, Boniface, and Pulisic, which sounds like a phenomenal team on paper. I'm hoping that, right, this team really locks in and really creates that quality that we all think that they can. But regardless of the fact is, I think overall it is looking like a very promising year. So let's get into some predictions for the season. So I'm going to save where Milan is going to finish for last. But for me, player of the season, I think it's going to be Leao, right? Last season, I said it was Reinders, and I think I hit that on the head, right? Where Reinders was by far our best player. It wasn't even close. But I think this year, I think, like I said, with the tone shift and kind of everything like that, and how you have experienced figures in the locker room like an Allegri, like a Modric, to really help out these players, I think this is kind of the formula to kind of get the best out of Leao, because we saw exactly that in the season that we won the Scudetto, right? You had guys like Ibrahimovic in the locker room, Maldini in the locker room. So I feel like this is kind of a similar formula. Obviously, I'd much rather have a Maldini in the locker room, right? But regardless of the fact is, you have these experienced figures in football to really cater to Leao and really to get the best out of him. And I think there is a huge emphasis on exactly that this season. Get the best out of Leao. And Allegri has said it in multiple press conferences. I want to make Leao a 20-goal season player, right? So I think that is also why I'm really investing a lot of my stock in Leao this season, which I don't think is a crazy shout. I think it's kind of an obvious one that, right, player of the season, Leao. But I think what we saw previously in seasons with Leao, he just couldn't stay consistent. And I think that's one of the things where I feel like is going to be a major difference maker in this year, right? Not only playing one game a week, which is, I think, going to really help Leao kind of just to focus on football, right? Because Champions League and, Europa League, and if you're playing, multiple competitions in a year, I think it can kind of take focus away from a lot of things. But regardless of the fact is, player of the season is going to be Rafael Leao. Now, most improved is between two players, and it was two players that I've already mentioned earlier in this video, Loftus-Cheek and Salam Makers. Those are two players that I'm also investing my stock in as well, just because of how different this system is compared to the Fonseca Conceição system, and honestly the Pioli system as well. I feel like the Pioli system was good, and I think it was much better than what Fonseca and Conceição gave us. But I think just something with Allegri kind of just gives me a lot more of a comfort, right, to kind of get the best out of these guys. And I feel like Allegri's development of players is sensational, right? So I think also because he wanted to keep Salam Makers and he wanted to keep Loftus-Cheek, these are players that he wanted. So I feel like Allegri is going to try his best to really get the best out of these guys and to really make them productive players in and game out. So that is something that I'm really looking forward to, is kind of just the development of Salam Makers and Loftus-Cheek, and honestly just a lot of these other players, right? Samuele Ricci, which is going to be really interesting to kind of see how Allegri kind of, morphs him into the midfield he wants. Obviously, Ardon Jashari as well is going to be someone that I'm investing my stocks into as well. So it's going to be really interesting to kind of see how Allegri kind of works his magic around developing these players and to really make them as productive as they need to be. This is a big year for Milan because, right, I think there's a lot of pressure as well because we have no European competitions. We're playing one game a week with the exception of a Coppa Italia here and there. But regardless of the fact is, there's a lot of pressure, I think, on Allegri and a lot of pressure on these players to really get the best out of this year. So my top goal scorer, I'm going Victor Boniface, baby. I'm really happy about this acquisition because there are so many, names looming about, right? There was always that Hoyland kind of deal looming about. There's that Vlahovic deal, around the corner and everything like that. And even though that Vlahovic deal still hasn't cooled down, which worries me a lot, I'd much rather have a Santiago Jimenez 1,000,000% over Vlahovic. Not a fan over Vlahovic. Do not like him. I'd rather have a tree at striker than Dusan Vlahovic at the number 9 position. And Allegri has even came out. My relationship with Jimenez is great and everything like that, but my top goal scorer is Victor Boniface, because this kind of just reminds me of a more mobile Giroud. And I feel like it's one of those where it's like he has like that technical ability to hold up the ball. He has a killer of a shot, right? That shot power. There's been so many clips where I just see Boniface rip that ball in the back of the net. And I'm really, really excited about Boniface going forward, right? His aerial ability is good. Of course, there's been that concern of his fitness, but I'm going to be completely honest. I seen a thing on Twitter, kind of circulating about how Boniface is injured and this and that. But realistically, he is no more injured than Leao every now and then. So I'm not really concerned about injury, right? Again, knock on wood. But regardless of the fact is, Boniface, this is someone that just has my mouth watering, because I feel like this is a striker that we've kind of needed. And I know I'm super high on Santiago Jimenez, and he was someone that I really wanted to really get that chance and to really get that opportunity. But I think to have competition in the squad, to really have Santiago Jimenez fight for that spot instead of it just being given to him, right? When we sold Morata, Camarda, and a bunch of other our strikers, Okafor as well, who is competing for that position. I feel like this is one of them where Santiago Jimenez has to really look at the reality of the situation and be like, look, I'm going up against a top striker, right? Boniface, proven in the Bundesliga with Bayer Leverkusen, right? So I think this is a player that I'm really looking forward to. And I mean, look, I think the celebration is fire, right? I cannot wait to see that happen. But Boniface, top player, and he's going to be my top goal scorer. So predictions, right, for where Milan is going to finish. I was very pessimistic, right, when I saw Allegri coming in. I said, oh, this team isn't going to make top 4, da-da-da. But obviously with the kind of tone shift and everything like that, I'm predicting that Milan is going to finish in 3rd place. I feel like that is just a safe option for me, right? If we go on and win the Scudetto, which for me right now just isn't looking likely, just because it's like I want to see how this Milan team plays over the course of the season, right? And I mean, maybe until you hit like Christmas time, that's where you can really get an idea of where this Milan team kind of sits in the Scudetto race. But regardless of the fact is, I feel like obviously playing one game a week is going to be very, very helpful. But I think Napoli right now are just a train that they are not going to stop. So I think that is one team that I'm really afraid of this year. And you're asking, oh, who's going to be in your 2nd place? I'm thinking, honestly, probably Inter, to be honest. They have that experience, even though they let go of Inzaghi and they let go of a lot of, big pieces of the puzzle. I think Inter are still a good team, right? And even though Kivu personally doesn't really convince me as a coach at all for Inter, right? Not my problem, but I do think that they still have the experience to finish in a higher position than us. But I hope I'm wrong. And I hope that Milan can finish, higher than 3rd. But I think when you kind of look at the reality of the situation, when you look at Milan, where they finished last season, right, 8th or 9th place, any place in the top 4 would be a success, right? Bottom line. So I think when you kind of just look at that, all things considered, I don't think 3rd place is a bad finish whatsoever. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. What have you kind of just thought of this summer mercato? Who's been your favorite signing this summer? And where do you think Milan is going to finish in the table next year? And also, who's going to be your player of the season, most improved, top goal scorer, everything like that? So guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Ciao ragazzi.